The city of San Francisco was shrouded in its usual mist, the fog creeping through the narrow alleyways and bustling streets. In a high-rise building, nestled among the skyscrapers, the law firm of Harper & Mason thrived on the cutting edge of corporate law. Its partners, David Harper and Laura Mason, were the epitome of success, respected, feared, and utterly ruthless. David Harper, a tall man in his mid-40s with sharp features and a commanding presence, had built his career on navigating the murky waters of corporate litigation. Laura Mason, his equally formidable partner, was known for her meticulous attention to detail and an uncanny ability to find loopholes in even the most ironclad contracts. Together, they were an unstoppable force in the world of high-stakes corporate law. Their latest case, however, was unlike any they had faced before. It involved the sudden and mysterious death of a young tech entrepreneur, Alex Reed, whose startup had been on the brink of a billion-dollar IPO. Reed's death had triggered a series of legal battles over the control of his company, with several powerful entities vying for a piece of the lucrative pie. At the heart of the case was a document, an email from Reed to his lawyer, just hours before his death, hinting at a major legal scandal involving insider trading and fraud. The email had vanished shortly after his demise, sparking rumors of a cover-up. Harper & Mason had been hired by one of Reed's competitors, TechWave Incorporated, to navigate the legal quagmire and secure a controlling stake in Reed's company. As the investigation deepened, David Harper found himself meeting with Sarah Blake, Alex Reed's personal attorney and a former law school rival. Sarah, a woman of fierce intelligence and sharp wit, had been entrusted with Reed's affairs. Her insistence on uncovering the truth behind Reed's death put her on a collision course with Harper & Mason. In a dimly lit conference room, David and Sarah faced off for the first time in years. The tension between them was palpable, a mixture of professional rivalry and unresolved personal history. Sarah's eyes narrowed as she presented a folder, her voice cold and precise. "These are the last known communications of Alex Reed," she stated. "You'll find nothing incriminating against TechWave, but you might find something that will make you rethink your position." David took the folder, his expression unreadable. He knew Sarah well enough to understand that she wouldn't bring this up unless she had something substantial. He opened the folder and skimmed through the documents, his face remaining impassive. But inside, his mind was racing. There were references to offshore accounts, shadowy transactions, and a mysterious figure known only as Mr. X. As David left the meeting, he couldn't shake the feeling that Sarah was playing a dangerous game, one that could bring down powerful figures in Silicon Valley. He had to tread carefully, balancing the interests of his clients with the need to uncover the truth. For Harper & Mason, this case was more than just a legal battle, it was a high-stakes game of cat and mouse, with fortunes and reputations hanging in the balance. Meanwhile, Laura Mason was digging deeper into the background of TechWave's CEO, James Marshall. Rumors of his involvement in Reed's death had begun to surface, suggesting that he had a lot more to lose if the truth came out. Laura's investigation led her to an obscure financial firm that had handled several transactions for both Reed and Marshall. The firm's records were incomplete, raising questions about whether they were hiding something, or someone. As the pieces of the puzzle began to come together, David and Laura realized they were not just fighting a legal battle, they were entangled in a web of deceit and corruption that stretched far beyond the boardrooms and courtrooms. The truth behind Alex Reed's death was more sinister than they could have imagined, and uncovering it would require risking everything they had built. In the shadows, unseen forces moved, watching and waiting. The mysterious Mr. X was a ghost, his true identity and motives shrouded in secrecy. As Harper & Mason delved deeper, they found themselves on the brink of a revelation that could shake the very foundations of Silicon Valley. But with every step they took, the danger grew, and they knew that some secrets were meant to stay buried. David Harper, Laura Mason, and Sarah Blake were about to discover just how far people would go to protect their secrets, and just how dangerous the truth could be. The tension in the air was palpable as David Harper and Laura Mason pored over the documents Sarah Blake had provided. They sat in Harper & Mason's sleek conference room, high above the fog-blanketed streets of San Francisco. The city below was a blur of lights and shadows, but up here, the stakes were crystal clear. The information Sarah had shared hinted at a labyrinthine conspiracy involving Alex Reed's death, insider trading, and a shadowy figure known only as Mr. X. "Sarah's playing a game," David muttered, his brow furrowed. "She's always been too clever for her own good." Laura looked up from the papers, her sharp eyes narrowed in thought. If Sarah's involved, then there's more to this than just a simple cover-up. She has a reputation for sniffing out corruption, and she wouldn't risk her career unless she was sure. David nodded, leaning back in his chair. "We need to find out who Mr. X is and how he's connected to Reed and TechWave. This could be the key to everything." As they strategized their next steps, Laura decided to leverage her contacts in the financial world. She reached out to an old friend, Mark Harrison, who specialized in forensic accounting. If anyone could trace the mysterious transactions mentioned in the documents, it was Mark. He agreed to meet her discreetly later that evening. Meanwhile, David arranged a private meeting with James Marshall, the CEO of TechWave. Marshall was a smooth operator, known for his charm and ruthlessness in equal measure. David needed to gauge just how much Marshall knew about Reed's death and whether he was hiding anything. The meeting took place in Marshall's penthouse office, overlooking the San Francisco skyline. Marshall greeted David with a confident smile, offering him a glass of scotch. They exchanged pleasantries before diving into the real reason for the meeting. "James," David began, "we need to talk about Alex Reed. His death has raised a lot of questions, and there are rumors circulating, rumors that could damage both your company and ours." Marshall's smile never faltered, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes, fear, perhaps, or calculation. "I'm aware of the rumors, David. But I assure you, TechWave had no involvement in Reed's death. Our focus has always been on legitimate business." David raised an eyebrow, swirling the scotch in his glass. "Legitimate business? Like the offshore accounts and shadowy transactions linked to Mr. X?" The mention of a Mr. X brought a brief, involuntary reaction from Marshall, a tightening of the jaw, a slight stiffening of posture. It was enough for David to know that Marshall was not only aware of Mr. X, but possibly implicated in the conspiracy. "David," Marshall said, his tone colder now, "I don't know what you're talking about. If you're insinuating that TechWave is involved in anything illegal, I suggest you be very careful." David met his gaze, unflinching. "I'm just trying to get to the truth, James. For all our sakes." The meeting ended on a tense note, with Marshall offering no further information. David left the penthouse with more questions than answers, but he was certain of one thing: James Marshall was hiding something, and it was connected to the mysterious Mr. X. That evening, Laura met with Mark Harrison at a quiet cafe away from prying eyes. Mark, a lanky man with a penchant for numbers, had already begun his investigation into the financial transactions. As they sat in a secluded corner, Mark revealed his findings. "There's a pattern," Mark said, spreading out a series of printouts. "The transactions are routed through a series of shell companies, all leading back to a single entity, an offshore account in the Cayman Islands, under the name of X Holdings. The account is tied to several tech companies, including Reed's and TechWave." Laura's mind raced as she connected the dots. "So, Mr. X is using these accounts to funnel money, possibly from insider trading or other illicit activities." Mark nodded. "It's likely. But tracing the actual person behind X Holdings is tricky. The account is heavily protected, and whoever's behind it has gone to great lengths to remain anonymous." As they continued to discuss the implications, Laura received a text message from an unknown number. It read, "Stop digging or face the consequences. This is your only warning." Laura showed the message to Mark, her expression grim. "It seems we're getting too close to the truth. Whoever Mr. X is, they're willing to go to extreme lengths to keep their secrets." Mark looked concerned but resolute. "We can't back down now. We need to expose this, whatever it takes." As Laura left the cafe, she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The message was a clear threat, and it meant they were on the right track. But the closer they got to the truth, the more dangerous the game became. Back at the office, David and Laura shared their findings and discussed their next move. The pieces were coming together: Marshall's evasiveness, the offshore accounts, the threatening message. They were dealing with something much bigger than a simple corporate dispute. In the shadows, Mr. X watched their every move, ready to strike if they got too close. For David Harper and Laura Mason, the stakes had never been higher. As they dug deeper into the conspiracy, they knew they were not just fighting for their careers, but for their lives. The truth behind Alex Reed's death was more sinister than they could have ever imagined, and the real battle was just beginning. The next morning, David Harper and Laura Mason sat in their office, the city's fog lifting as the sun began to pierce through. The previous day's revelations had only deepened the mystery, and the threat from Mr. X loomed over them like a dark cloud. They knew they needed to tread carefully, but the truth was too important to ignore. Laura's phone buzzed, breaking the silence. It was Mark Harrison, sounding urgent. "Laura, I found something. I was going through the records again and noticed something odd. There's a pattern of transfers linked to a legal firm in Washington, D.C. The firm specializes in corporate law and has a reputation for handling delicate matters." Laura's eyes widened. "Do you have a name?" "Yeah," Mark replied, "it's Stevenson and Associates. And guess what? One of their senior partners is Jack Stevenson, a former high-ranking official in the SEC. He's got connections everywhere. Laura quickly jotted down the information. Thanks, Mark. This could be the break we need. As she ended the call, Laura relayed the information to David. Stevenson and Associates. We need to find out everything we can about this firm and its connection to Mr. Hexda. David nodded, already thinking ahead. Let's see if we can find a way to get someone on the inside. If they have any ties to Mr. X, we need to know. They decided to enlist the help of an old contact, a private investigator named Jack Owens. Jack had a reputation for getting into places and finding information that others couldn't. He was also discreet and trustworthy, qualities they needed in this delicate situation. Jack agreed to take the job and quickly set about investigating Stevenson and Associates. Meanwhile, David and Laura continued to piece together the puzzle. The firm's connection to the SEC suggested that Mr. Hex might be manipulating stock markets or using insider information to profit illegally. As Jack dug deeper, he uncovered something alarming. One of the firm's clients was a shell corporation that had been involved in several high-profile mergers and acquisitions, many of which were suspiciously timed with market fluctuations. It all pointed to a sophisticated scheme of insider trading and market manipulation, orchestrated by Mr. Hex. With this new information, David and Laura realized the scale of what they were dealing with. Mr. Hex wasn't just a shadowy figure, he was deeply entrenched in the financial and legal systems, using his position and connections to manipulate markets and amass a fortune. The stakes were higher than ever, and the risk to their own lives and careers became increasingly real. As they prepared to confront the new revelations, Sarah Blake called, her voice tense. David, we need to talk. I've uncovered something big, but it's dangerous. We can't meet at the office, it's not safe. David agreed, arranging to meet Sarah at a quiet cafe on the outskirts of the city. As they sat down, Sarah slid a file across the table. This is everything I've found on Mr. Hex. It's worse than we thought. He's been involved in blackmail, bribery, and even a few mysterious disappearances. David's eyes scanned the documents, the implications sinking in. How is he connected to Alex Reed? Sarah hesitated, then leaned in closer. Reed was on the verge of exposing Mr. Hex. He had gathered evidence of the insider trading scheme and was planning to go public. That's why he was killed. David felt a chill run down his spine. So Reed's death wasn't an accident. It was a hit. Sarah nodded grimly. And if we don't play this right, we could be next. The gravity of the situation was clear. They were dealing with a powerful, ruthless individual who wouldn't hesitate to eliminate anyone threatening his empire. As they sat in the cafe, planning their next move, they knew they had to be cautious. The wrong step could cost them everything. Back at Harper & Mason, Laura received another anonymous message, "You're getting too close. Stop now, or you'll regret it." She shared the message with David and Sarah, their faces reflecting the growing danger. They had stirred the hornet's nest, and Mr. Hex was clearly willing to protect his secrets at all costs. As they plotted their strategy, Jack Owens called with an urgent update. "I found something else. Stevenson and Associates is connected to several offshore accounts, all linked to a private security firm that has a history of dealing with unsavory matters." David's face hardened. "You mean they handle dirty work?" "Exactly," Jack confirmed. "And they have a reputation for making problems disappear." The pieces were falling into place. Mr. Hex wasn't just a financial mastermind, he had a network of enforcers and operatives willing to do whatever it took to maintain control. The stakes had never been higher, and the risk to their own lives was growing by the hour. As David, Laura, and Sarah prepared to take the next step, they knew they had to act fast and decisively. The web of deceit and corruption was vast, and Mr. Hex had shown he was willing to kill to protect it. They were racing against time to uncover the truth, expose Mr. Hex, and ensure their own safety. But as the shadows closed in around them, one thing was clear: the closer they got to the truth, the more dangerous the game became. And in this high-stakes game, the price of failure was their lives. David, Laura, and Sarah sat around the conference table, the weight of their discoveries pressing down on them. The information Jack Owens had uncovered painted a chilling picture of a Mr. Hex as a puppet master, pulling strings in both the corporate and criminal underworlds. The private security firm connected to Stevenson and Associates, known for its ability to handle delicate situations, added a new layer of danger. "We can't go to the police," Sarah stated flatly. "Not yet. Mr. X has connections everywhere. We need solid evidence, something indisputable that can bring him down." Laura nodded in agreement. "What about the offshore accounts Jack mentioned? If we can trace the money and link it directly to Mr. Hex, we might have enough to force the authorities to act." David considered their options. "We'll need to be discreet. If Mr. X gets wind that we're closing in, he won't hesitate to eliminate us. Sarah looked at him, her eyes determined. Then we need to move quickly and quietly. I'll handle the legal side, getting warrants, freezing accounts. Laura, you and Jack work on tracing the money trail. David, see if you can dig up more on the private security firm. We need to know who we're dealing with. As they set their plan in motion, the atmosphere in the office was tense. Jack Owens, working from a remote location, focused on unearthing the connections between the offshore accounts and Mr. X. His findings revealed a complex web of shell companies and financial transactions designed to obscure the money's origins and destinations. However, one account stood out, a significant sum transferred to a property development company in Miami, owned by an alias frequently used by Mr. X. Laura delved deeper into the property development company, uncovering a series of suspicious real estate deals that suggested money laundering. The properties were overvalued and quickly resold, often to anonymous buyers. This pattern was consistent with efforts to clean dirty money and funnel it into legitimate investments. Meanwhile, David investigated the private security firm, Enigma Solutions. Known for its discretion and efficiency, the firm had ties to several questionable operations, including intimidation and, potentially, assassination. Their client list was secretive, but David managed to obtain a name linked to their most sensitive operations, Jack Stevenson, the same man connected to the SEC and Stevenson and Associates. As they compiled their evidence, Sarah received a tip from an unexpected source, a whistleblower from within Enigma Solutions. The whistleblower, using the pseudonym Cassandra, provided crucial information linking the firm directly to Mr. X. According to Cassandra, Mr. X was using Enigma Solutions to enforce his will, including silencing those who threatened to expose him. With this new information, Sarah realized they needed to act fast. They had enough to expose Mr. X, but only if they could secure Cassandra's testimony. However, contacting Cassandra posed a significant risk. If Mr. X discovered the whistleblower's identity, her life would be in immediate danger. David, Laura, and Sarah debated their next steps, weighing the risks. They decided to set up a secret meeting with Cassandra, arranging it under the guise of a routine legal consultation. To ensure Cassandra's safety, they used a secure line and encrypted communications, masking their intentions and locations. The meeting was scheduled at a secluded location, far from prying eyes. David and Sarah arrived first, scanning the area for any signs of surveillance. Laura, stationed nearby, kept watch, ready to alert them to any potential threats. Cassandra arrived, a woman in her late 30s with a nervous demeanor. She handed over a dossier containing detailed records of Enigma Solutions operations, including contracts, payment records, and incriminating emails that linked Mr. X to several illegal activities, including the death of Alex Reed. "This is everything I have," Cassandra said, her voice trembling. "I can't stay in the country after this. They'll find me." Sarah reassured her. "We'll protect you. We have contacts who can help you disappear. You've done the right thing." As they wrapped up the meeting, David noticed a car idling nearby. His instincts kicked in, and he quickly ushered Cassandra and Sarah to the back of the building. Laura, on alert, signaled them to a secondary exit. The car began to move, heading towards them. David knew they had to act fast. He led them to a narrow alleyway, slipping through a back door into an adjacent building. The car passed by, not noticing them, but the close call left everyone on edge. They regrouped at a safe house, where they reviewed the dossier Cassandra had provided. The evidence was damning, directly linking Mr. X to a host of crimes, including fraud, bribery, and murder. With Cassandra's testimony and the documents in hand, they had enough to go public. But they knew Mr. X would not go down without a fight. The threat to their lives was real, and they needed to protect themselves and Cassandra. They reached out to a trusted contact in the FBI, providing them with the evidence and arranging for Cassandra's protection under a witness protection program. As they prepared to release the information, the reality of their situation set in. They were taking on a powerful figure with deep connections and a willingness to kill to protect his secrets. The fallout could be immense, but they knew they had to see it through. The stage was set for the final showdown. David, Laura, and Sarah, now fully aware of the dangers they faced, steeled themselves for the storm to come. The truth was about to be revealed, and Mr. X's empire was on the verge of collapse. But they also knew that exposing such a powerful figure would bring unpredictable consequences. As they waited for the FBI to make their move, a sense of unease settled over them. They had done everything they could, but the final outcome was still uncertain. The battle against Mr. X was far from over, and they could only hope that justice would prevail. The clock was ticking, and the countdown to the truth had begun. The atmosphere in the office of Harper and Mason was thick with anticipation. The evidence against Mr. X had been handed over to the FBI, and now all they could do was wait. David, Laura, and Sarah knew the repercussions of their actions would soon unfold. The FBI's plan was to make a simultaneous raid on the headquarters of Stevenson and Associates, Enigma Solutions, and several key properties linked to Mr. X. The goal was to gather any remaining evidence and arrest the primary players before they could react. In the safe house, Cassandra, the whistleblower, was under constant protection. The FBI had moved her to an undisclosed location, ensuring her safety as they prepared to make their move. The team felt a mixture of relief and anxiety, relief that the case was finally coming to a head, and anxiety over what might happen next. Mr. X was not someone to go down quietly. As dawn approached, the FBI operation went into full swing. Agents stormed the offices of Stevenson and Associates, seizing documents and arresting key figures. Simultaneously, Enigma Solutions was raided, with several operatives taken into custody. Jack Stevenson, the mastermind behind the corporate and criminal activities, was arrested at his mansion, where he was found shredding documents, a futile effort as the FBI had already secured the evidence they needed. The news broke across all major outlets. The arrest of Jack Stevenson, known publicly as a respected corporate lawyer, sent shockwaves through the legal and business communities. Reports of his involvement in insider trading, market manipulation, and even the orchestration of Alex Reed's murder were splashed across headlines. The revelation of Enigma Solutions' role in these crimes, including their involvement in silencing potential whistleblowers, further intensified public outrage. David, Laura, and Sarah watched the news coverage with a sense of accomplishment but also wariness. They had successfully exposed Mr. X and his network, but they knew the fight wasn't entirely over. The legal proceedings would be lengthy, and the fallout would be widespread. In the following days, more details emerged. The FBI released a statement detailing the charges against Stevenson and his associates, including conspiracy, wire fraud, and first-degree murder. The evidence provided by Cassandra was crucial in securing these charges. She was hailed as a hero by some, while others saw her as a traitor. For her safety, she was placed in the Witness Protection Program, with a new identity and location. As the dust began to settle, David and Laura reflected on the journey they had undertaken. The case had pushed them to their limits, both professionally and personally. It had also brought them closer together, reigniting a partnership forged in their early days as lawyers. They knew the firm's reputation had taken a hit during the case, but the successful takedown of Mr. X had also elevated their status as defenders of justice. Sarah Blake, meanwhile, found herself at a crossroads. The case had reignited her passion for uncovering corruption and seeking justice. She decided to leave her private practice and join a public interest law firm, focusing on cases involving corporate malfeasance and corruption. The experience had changed her, reinforcing her belief in the importance of integrity in the legal profession. As the trial of Jack Stevenson approached, the team prepared for one final battle. Stevenson's defense team was formidable, and they would use every trick in the book to discredit the evidence and the witnesses, including Cassandra. The trial promised to be a spectacle, drawing intense media attention and public scrutiny. In court, the prosecution presented a compelling case, with evidence meticulously laid out to show the extent of Stevenson's criminal activities. Testimonies from key witnesses, including Cassandra, painted a damning picture of a man who had used his legal expertise and connections to manipulate markets, destroy lives, and amass a hidden fortune. The defense tried to cast doubt on the credibility of the witnesses and the legality of the evidence, but the prosecution's case was too strong. After weeks of testimony and deliberation, the jury returned a verdict, guilty on all counts. Jack Stevenson was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The other conspirators received varying sentences, depending on their level of involvement. The sentencing brought a sense of closure, but also a sobering reminder of the dark underbelly of the corporate and legal worlds. As the case concluded, David, Laura, and Sarah stood outside the courthouse, reflecting on the journey they had undertaken. They had faced immense challenges, uncovered a web of corruption, and brought a dangerous criminal to justice. The experience had changed them, leaving scars but also a deeper understanding of the importance of their work. In the end, the truth had prevailed, but at a cost. Lives had been disrupted, careers had been put on the line, and the dangers they had faced were real. But as they looked to the future, they knew they had made a difference. The legacy of their work would live on, a testament to the power of perseverance, courage, and the relentless pursuit of justice. And in the quiet moments that followed, as they walked away from the courthouse and back into the bustling streets of San Francisco, they knew that while this chapter had closed, there would always be more battles to fight. The world of law and justice was ever-changing, and they were ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, armed with the knowledge that they had already faced, and defeated, one of the most formidable adversaries imaginable.